And you know, he made the impact here also in Washington, D.C., and that's where we have 11 Alive's Faith Jesse. She's live out there right now as she anticipates the arrival of President Carter. And what is the situation like? What is the mood like there as they head your way, Faith?
Ron, I'll tell you that this is going to be a continuation of what we saw in planes up to Atlanta and then right here to D.C. I'll tell you that the story here is surrounding the weather. Much like it was very cold here in Atlanta, it was a snowstorm here in D.C. shutting down the city yesterday. Schools were closed. Federal offices were closed. The airport here shut down for some time. Now you take a look around me. Every once in a while you see a car driving by. That was not the case yesterday. A lot of snow, a lot of muck on the ground. The crews are out here powering through. The sun is up, a little bit warmer, that snow melting down to make room for what is going to be a beautiful motorcade and procession to the building right behind me, the state capitol, where President Carter will lie in state. When he touches down here in D.C. at Joint Base Andrews, all the way to the Navy Memorial, going down Pennsylvania Avenue, coming to the Capitol, each part of what you'll see today was planned out piece by piece by Mr. Carter and his late wife, Rosalind Carter. It started back in 1986 with the Joint Task Force. They planned out everything from the locations to the music that you're going to hear to the people that were invited. Everything has significance. And it really goes back to what Ms. Brenda was saying, that he was a man of the people, a president of the people. When we see him and the case and going down Pennsylvania Avenue, it is an ode to that iconic moment when he and Mrs. Carter decided to get out of that limousine, to stop that tradition, to be on foot, to be there with the people. So that's what we're seeing here in Washington so far tonight. People will be able to come and pay their respects throughout the night, throughout tomorrow, and then we will see that state funeral on Thursday before he is flown back to Plains for his final resting place. So that's a little bit of what we're seeing here in D.C. We'll send it back to you in Atlanta.
All right, Faith, thank you so much. We'll be checking back with you throughout the evening. We do want to go now to 11 Alive anchor Cheryl Preheim. She is also in Washington, D.C. And Cheryl, we know that you have been spending the morning reflecting on the life of President Carter and speaking with other notable dignitaries as well.
Yes, all of whom are planning to be inside the Capitol Rotunda when former President Carter arrives. I love that Faith was telling the story about that moment that will happen down Pennsylvania Avenue. It will really bring a really special moment full circle, because as the President and First Lady surprised the world, jumped out of the limousine and never had been done before and walked along Pennsylvania Avenue because they wanted to make a conscious decision and really make a statement that they were going to be accessible to the people, that today the family will follow the case in down Pennsylvania Avenue until it arrives here at the United States Capitol, and that will be an extraordinary moment. We've been talking to Senators Warnock and Ossoff today, of course representing Georgia, about the significance of this day here in the nation's capital and for our home state of Georgia. Senator Warnock, of course, feels a connection because he, as a reverend who goes back home to preach on the weekends, connects with the president who taught Sunday school at his church here in D.C., just a few blocks away from the Capitol. Here's a little bit of our conversation reflecting on the life of President Carter. We're inside the Russell Rotunda of the Senate building here with Senator Raphael Warnock, of course, representing Georgia on an historic day here in D.C., a final journey for the only president from Georgia. Your thoughts as we start these ceremonies here in the Capitol?
Well, let me just say that Jimmy Carter, President Carter, is one of my heroes, and I'm so proud of this leading light coming out of Georgia. He's the first president that I really remember as a kid. And I never thought as a kid growing up in public housing that one day I'd get to know him personally. But I got to know him over the years. He would worship with us virtually on our online service every Sunday. His grandson is a member of my church, and I've been deeply honored to walk with his family even to this very moment.
I think it's really telling that he made an impression on you as a child and that you still draw on that in your service to the country.
Well, I'm Baptist and he's Baptist. And You know, here's somebody who really demonstrates for me what it means to make your faith come alive in public service. I often say that I am not a senator who used to be a pastor, but a pastor in the Senate. My work here, in a real sense, is an extension of my lifelong commitment to ministry. And I think that's why I feel a real resonance with Jimmy Carter, because he's an example of what that might look like. Somebody who, as a Sunday school teacher, read Matthew 25, I was hungry and you fed me. I was in prison, I was sick, and you visited me. I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink. And Jimmy Carter literally took those lessons and applied them to public policy. First, as a president, where he centered human rights in American diplomacy, which was no foregone conclusion. He pushed that and centered it as a piece of our agenda, something that must remain there in his view. Someone who fought for peace in the Middle East and made great historic progress there. But then long after leaving the White House, continuing to fight for the poor and most marginalized members of the human family. For me, that's what faith is all about. My faith is not a weapon, it's a bridge. And Jimmy Carter is one of my examples.
What do you hope, based on his character, what people are remembering about his kindness and the way he kind of handled himself as a person above politics, would you like to see carry on even as we transition to a new era here in Washington?
You know, our politics has become so coarse, and there's a kind of cynicism that attends much of American politics. I think you look at somebody like Jimmy Carter and you realize that in the end, good wins. Good wins, that it's right to do right, kindness, justice, mercy, truth. I think those virtues still matter. And, you know, there's been a lot made of the fact that he lived to be 100, but you can live 100 years and never do anything for anybody. Jimmy Carter didn't just live to 100, he taught us how to give 100. He gave 100 as an American citizen, as a patriot, and as a humanitarian who cared about people all over the globe. We could use more of that right now in our politics.
Striking thoughts as we are less than 2 weeks from an inauguration from Senator Warnock. And one other thing he mentioned I thought that was really interesting. He had a chance to be in the Carter's home, and he was struck by their decision to live frugally in the home they had had for decades, with wood paneling still on the wall and a phone that still had a cord, just because the president said it still works. Why would we replace it? And it is, I think, worth noting in this kind of time of contrast as we drove by the White House today, contrasting the White House with the house in Plains, where he will be buried next to Rosalind, his wife of 77 years, under that willow tree off the front porch. And also the contrast between the National Cathedral, which will host the funeral on Thursday. Dignitaries, of course, from all over the country and the world will be there in what will be a very significant and meaningful service. But the contrast of then going full circle back to Plains, Maranatha Baptist Church seats about 300, and over the pulpit, that wooden cross that Jimmy Carter himself crafted, the carpenter who was also a president and a humanitarian and a naval officer and a submarinist. What a Renaissance man being honored here at the U.S. Capitol. We expect a big crowd at the U.S. Capitol later this afternoon as the public is invited to say a final thank you and a final goodbye. Brenda, Ron, Jennifer, really a feeling in the Capitol of stillness. I think there's something about the snow over the city and all the flags at half-staff. The snow kind of forced this slowdown, but it feels fitting as we take a moment and take a breath and honor the life of someone who dedicated his life to others in so many forms.